Hi there, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony, Stratford, and we're continuing our series of short talks on the Ten Commandments. And today we come to the second commandment, and we read about this in Deuteronomy 5, verse 8. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or in earth beneath, or in the waters below. When the Jews have been in Egypt, they would have been immersed in the idols and the worship around them. And yet Moses have reminded them this is not how they were to worship God. Their experience of God was very different. God had spoken to them. They hadn't seen anything, but they'd heard the words. In Deuteronomy 4, we read this, verse 12, "Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but saw no form. There was only a voice." And actually then Moses virtually repeats that. Verse 15, "You saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire." This is a God who speaks because he wanted to enter into relationship with his people. As I said, the Israelites would have been surrounded by idol worship in Egypt, and it's very likely, we know from other parts of Scripture, that they practiced it themselves. It was going to be a constant temptation with the peoples of the Promised Land, and we know that they had already succumbed to it when they made the golden calf. And it was so easy to find inspiration. In Deuteronomy 4, there's a list of things they are not to worship. Stars, moon, sun, various animals, both in the sea and on dry land, all of which have been used in some form of idol worship at some time. Why is idol worship so bad? Two reasons, really. The first one, very importantly, it diminishes who God is. Nothing can really represent God in his glory. Any image is going to debase him, isn't it? The other thing is it degrades us. Brian Edwards, in his book, The Ten Commandments, talks of a time when he was sitting in a doctor's writing room. So he picked up a magazine, he was flicking through it, and he came across a picture of a religious procession. And he looked at these men. There were four men carrying this idol, and they were respectably dressed, and he thought that man could be a doctor. That man a banker, that one an architect, that one a businessman. And they put themselves in a subservient position to this idol, this lump of wood or metal. How degrading. But what is the issue here? One of the things I think we always have to do with the commandments is to remember the context in which they are given. In Deuteronomy 5, verse 6, which we looked at a few weeks ago, we see God's relationship with his people. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." Before they'd asked him to do anything, he had done everything. He'd done it because of his promises to their forefathers and his love for them and their forefathers. And so this explains the next part of the commandment, verse 9. "You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to thousands generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." Does that cause us a bit of a problem? Do we think of jealousy as bad? Well, as I said, God had loved his people and was going to give them such a wonderful new life if they would follow his commandments. On our wedding day, Tracy and I made vows to each other. That was, I would love her, I would look after her, and she would do the same for me. And the key thing is this: in that relationship, there was no third party. It wasn't, "I'll love you as long as I feel like it." No, we made a commitment. And if there was a third party on either side, then the other party, whoever it is, Tracy or myself, would have a right to feel jealous because the exclusivity of our love had been compromised. That's the case here. Like father, like son is an expression that's often given, isn't it? It basically means that we, for better or worse, follow what our fathers or our parents do. And bad habits can breed bad habits in further generations. But this just the stereotypical God of the Old Testament who just punishes left, right and centre? No, I don't think so at all. There are plenty of examples of it in Scripture of God showing his love to those who turn to him. We see it in several occasions. You can see it in the book of Ruth. She was a Moabitess. The Moabites had made it hard for Israel when they came out of Egypt. She would have been excluded generally from Israel society, but she's invited in. But there's a very interesting example of people outside of what we would say decent society being invited in. And this is where Jesus in John's Gospel chapter 4 meets the woman at the well. She's a Samaritan. Jews and Samaritans did not get on. Jews would not go through Samaritan territory. Samaritans were not opposed to giving them a good hiding if they did, or even worse, killing them. So she's amazed when Jesus speaks to her. And it's quite amazing because she starts to be unnerved by the questions and things he's saying to her. And then they get on to the subject of worship. She pops a theological question, probably because she's embarrassed by some of the other things that are coming out. And Jesus talks about true worship. And he says this, John 4, verse 23, "Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth." That is how we are to approach God. He is spirit, and we are to not degrade him or belittling him by compromising our worship and worshipping objects rather than God in his true glory. Thank you for listening.